Pastor Roger Patterson with Vision for Life Radio, where faith and sports collide.
Welcome to Vision for Life Radio, where faith and sports collide. I'm here, Roger Patterson, here at our Crosspoint Church studio with Pastor Tim Yeager, our lead student pastor. We love getting together, talking sports weekly, and also digging in deep about our faith. And we appreciate you joining us today. We have a special guest, friend of the show. This is probably your third or fourth time joining us. It's Spencer Tillman. He is an OU Sooner. Sick 'em, go Bears. He is a former Oiler and San Francisco 49er. He's a Fox Sports 1 analyst, and he is all things football. He is on a local show here in Houston. Is it Inside the Game? Is that right, on ABC 13?
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's
every
right,
Sunday night, breaking down the Houston Texans in an awesome way and doing the X's and O's. And, man, brother, God bless you. Thanks for joining us today.
Pastor, good to be here. And, Tim, good to hear your voice as well. Looking forward to the time.
Hey, let's talk Texans-Patriots. This podcast drops on a Wednesday. It's Monday midday as we're doing this recording. They just beat the Patriots. The Texans just beat the Patriots last night 28-22 at NRG. You were on TV breaking that down last night. What did you see?
Well, it was a lot. I think the score was not necessarily indicative of the dominance I think the Texans enjoyed for much of the game. And I think Tom Brady being Tom Brady, although he's still getting up in age, he's obviously diminishing some talent. But to be able to close that gap in such a relatively short period of time, shorthanded on offense, with really only one real tool, a real threat in Edelman, I thought it was impressive. But the Texans are really in a unique spot right now. Romeo Crennel, with one of his defensive backs back in the mix, was able to kind of what we call bracket. That's where you put something around a person on either side to kind of limit their production. And so Edelman was kind of kept in check a little bit. And without anybody else, I think that made it easier to defend them. So they were one-dimensional. And you're an aging quarterback, an offense that's still struggling, no Gronkowski, just so many weapons that we've come used to seeing them exploit, not available to them now. And the Texans were able to take advantage of that. They populated the line of scrimmage, put a bunch of bodies around it, and then the 41-year-old quarterback can only do so much. He did have one little 13-yard little scamper, but other than that, they contained him and frustrated him with coverage. So it was a total domination, I think, by the Texans. And the Patriots have dropped to two in a row, it looks like now, against the Ravens and now the Texans. Is it and they've known for their defense. So is part of this, and their defense is breaking down as well, or is it just a lack of offensive production? I think it was a combination of things, and that's a great way of looking at it, whether it was offensive production breaking down or what. I think it came down to this. I think it's about being able to stretch the field both vertically and horizontally. In other words, you can come out in a stretch formation, but if your personnel isn't really going to make them do anything, they'll figure out that you've got a faux offense. But the Texans, when they do it, it could be Will Fuller. It could be DeAndre Hopkins. It could be Duke Johnson coming out of the backfield. So now you've got the total width of the field being legitimately stretched. And so a defense has to honor that. And I think that's kind of what the elixir was for the Texans, and what put stress on what heretofore was a pretty solid, in fact, probably in a lot of people's minds, a generational defense. But they got exposed a little bit. And all defenses have weaknesses. But when you have those many offensive assets, got a bunch of weaknesses. You had Deshaun Watson reading that defense big time last night. When they would play zone, he would just drop it off in the, right in that soft spot between those linebackers. When they were playing man and they're taking Hopkins out, he's going to say, all right, let me go to Fuller. And I love they go deep to Fuller. He drops it in the end zone. Very next play, they go deep again and hit with Kenny Stills for a touchdown on that man coverage on the outside. And I think you get that's Pastor, you're doing a real good job of breaking this thing down, because that's exactly what you're doing. See, now inside of that, that's what we call the show Inside the Game. Inside of that is, how are you able to go deep? Well, the one thing that Bill O'Brien did, he did not succumb to having, Titus Howard on the injured reserve list. So now you've got Clark outside of him. That was a potential threat. He could have succumbed to that and tried to keep protection inside. But in order to get those players downfield, it's going to take you 4.5 seconds or more past the average amount of time it takes the average play, which subjects your quarterback to being hit. But he didn't. You did that without compromising their protection. So being able to get those receivers downfield where you can make those great plays shows you a little bit about Bill's confidence in his offensive line, and ability to protect his quarterback. And when you got guys running in man coverage, their back is to the quarterback, and that means they can't see where he's coming. So he can pull the ball down and go get him 14 yards if he needs to.
You know, flip the side of the ball. Our defense, I mean, you've got a lot of changes on the defensive line with Watt out, Clowney being traded. Martin comes in, and I remember when the trade happened, they were talking about this guy Martin. Oh, he's trash. He's this, that, and the other. This guy was blowing it up on the edge with his pass rush. I mean, he was blowing past that right tackle. I mean, big time, and getting to the quarterback, getting hits. You know, I mean, they were getting to Brady, but you also then have a reinforced secondary. You got some guys getting healthy. They're spying the running back with a corner versus a linebacker. Talk about the Texans defense and where you see it going the rest of the way.
Well, there's a new dimension that's kind of been inserted in there, that speed and quickness. Now, Brennan Scarlett was out of the game. You know, he's got an injury situation. So you bring in a guy who, and you alluded to this, people thought he was just more of a spare part. And I think, you know, Jacob Martin is more than a spare part. He is an unbelievably gifted, athletic guy who's able to dip and bend the corner and get that shoulder with the rip technique to get to the quarterback. He did that a couple of times yesterday. And this is the second week in a row where he's registered a sack. So he's been productive. He's, once again, more than just a spare part. So now you got the speed element. You move a Minihue down inside. He's got length and strength inside. So for those people who are anchoring down for a reader and just bowing their shoulders to deal with that, now you got to deal with length and speed too. So you got a toolbox guy. You got a guy that's got multiple weapons in his arsenal of moves inside. He's not just going to be a bull rusher. So now all of a sudden you're looking at this team morph into something a little bit more than what they were with JJ in there, and it's causing teams problems. So I think it's an asset. You add that with Romeo Crennel, who can give you so much with the 3-4 front just to begin with. I mean, because that's what the whole reason behind the 3-4 is. It creates flexibility. Sure. You're not quite sure where the pressure is going to come from. So it looks like it's inviting to run against it because those guards are uncovered. But when you put two linebackers, Bernard McKinney being one of them, big, heavy guys that can take on blockers, those run fits get really, really full of integrity with all of that manhood in there. And all of a sudden, they're not as porous as they look pre-snap.
So Texans are sitting a game ahead of the Titans right now, but 2 of the next 4 games to wrap up the season is going to be against Tennessee Titans. Tim Yeager across from me, he's an Aggie, and so he's excited about his boy Tannehill playing a little quarterback there in Nashville. But you think Texans run away with it? They're in the driver's seat. They're a game ahead of the Titans, but do they run away with it?
Yeah, you know, I was doing some radio earlier, and the question was, and Mark Vandermeer, the voice of the Texans, kind of borrowed my phrase. He said, I'm going to borrow your phrase, Spencer. He said, how well can they run with a full cup of success? And that's really what the issue is. The issue is, okay, so now you've done something you haven't done before, at least under Bill O'Brien, and that's been able to beat a team that's a perennial favorite to always play for the Super Bowl or be in the driver's seat at some given point. So now how do you handle that? I subscribe to a snap and clear mentality. You know, it's kind of like the old Kipler If poem. When you can meet victory and defeat and treat those imposters the same, that's how you approach it. It doesn't really matter. I think the greatest lessons I've always learned have come when on the heels of a loss, and it's not so much a victory. So if you can take that mindset and let that affect how you prepare, or ultimately not let victory affect how you prepare, that is to say, do less than you were doing before, you're going to be okay. And I think that's where the Texans are right now. Only time will tell exactly how they manage that process, but that crisis will certainly expose who you are at that given point.
Well, and here's the thing, right? As a fan, and I'm a fan first when it comes to my Texans, I don't want to be too critical of them and get too high with them. But, you know, I look back and I go, okay, great, we beat the Pats yesterday. And you've done that twice in their history. But, man, we just got beat up and down the field against the Ravens the previous week. Is it just because the Ravens are that much better, or were we unprepared? Or because I'm like, I expected that, and that's my frustration, is because we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. Are we? I know we won last night. Are we heading in the right direction?
I think you're headed in the right direction. The Texans are, but let me just kind of reverse engineer what's happening with the Ravens. The Ravens are more talented team than most people, you know, everybody's, you know, lifting them up right now. But the bottom line is this. In the off season, I usually make about 15, 16 trips to universities around the country for various reasons, just kind of get to know coaches and so forth. At about 9 of those stops, I saw people who were associated with the Ravens. And what the Ravens were trying to do was get a beat on how to fully exploit the talent of Lamar Jackson, right? We knew what this guy was able to do at Louisville. He was a gifted talent guy, won the Heisman Trophy, was a Lombardi finalist and all that stuff. But there are very few coaches that are willing to fully use those gifts and talents. Usually what you find is just the opposite, Pastor. They try to shoehorn them into a pro-style system. And that's the problem. A good coach, a real coach, an authentic coach, looks at that suite of skill set and say, hey, how can we then coach this guy up to maximize those gifts and talents? It's like, to me, it's very biblical. Train up a child in the way that they should go. When they're old, they won't depart. What are those inclinations? What are those gifts? What are those talents? And so as a coach, like a parent, we observe those and then steer that person in that direction. And it may require finding coaches who can coach that. If not, let's get on the road in the offseason and go figure it out. So now you've got a juggernaut. They are basically the 2000 Ravens, only with talent. That Ravens team that won the Super Bowl then, they had Trent Dilfer and Jamal Lewis and then Shannon Sharp. That's all they had on offense. Everybody knows about Ray Lewis and all that. But they're basically the 2000 group with an offense now. That's what they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's incredible. So let's pick your tell us who you see in the Super Bowl. Then we'll get to some college football.
Well, listen, I'm going to be biased here. I think the Texans have an outside chance. I think there's going to be a little sneaky thing that takes place with one J.J. Watt. I think he's ultimately, this is just my own personal opinion, sitting on the board at Methodist Hospital, I've talked to some doctors about possibility and probability of people coming back from certain injuries, and my gut tells me that he may be available. If they get to that first round of playoffs, he may be available, and that's just me talking to you and your podcast audience. There's an outside chance there, and just even the specter of that could affect preparation for people. So that can be a good thing. And coaches don't mind that news getting out there.
Well, we'll be happy to help drop that rumor and get the word out.
And then who do you think comes out of the NFC?
I don't know. I mean, 49ers look good. I think that they possibly could do it. It all comes down to offense, to defense. Defense wins championships. That's not just a cliche. You go back and look. Only 6 times in the history of the Super Bowl has a lower-rated defensive team won the Super Bowl. That is to say, you can have an average offense and win the Super Bowl, i.e. those 2000 Ravens, but you cannot have an average defense and win. So when you look at what they're doing in San Francisco on defense, they're up there, top-tier defense, but they've got enough offense, quality offense, to be successful as well. So I like them just as much as anybody.